Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan. With me today is my friend and my very, very special guest, former delegate Aruna Miller, candidate for lieutenant governor with Wes Moore. Aruna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat this evening.
I am thrilled to be joining you, Senator Kagan. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So there's so many people who are eager to learn more about you, and just stay at the very beginning. Big fan of Runa's, big fan of Wes's, and that's my ticket. And so this is definitely going to be an opportunity for folks to learn more about you. So let's start at the very beginning. You were born in India and came here at age 7. And why don't you tell the story about your arrival? Because it's so charming.
Oh, of course. So my grandmother raised me when I was in India up until I was 7 years old. My mom and dad and my siblings were already in the United States. So my dad came to India to get me. I was the last to arrive. And I'll never forget, it was February 1972. I'm 7 years old. My dad and I step off the airplane in New York City, and I'm in his arms. And I'm thinking everybody at the airport is waiting for my dad and I welcome us to the United States of America. Not only that, I thought they were throwing confetti to welcome us even more. Turns out it wasn't confetti, but it was snow that was falling all around us because I had never seen snow before.
So precious. And you started off in Poughkeepsie and made your way to Missouri, where you studied University of Missouri Science and Tech, and became a woman in STEM. So talk about your education, as if you would, your childhood and then your graduate degree.
Sure. Well, I mean, I got another funny story about the immigrant kid that comes to the United States. So if you don't mind, I'll tell you that one as well. My first day of school, I go into the classroom. Nobody in the classroom looks anything like me. I don't know a word of English. And I'm thinking, how am I going to fit in with all my classmates? So, of course, food is a great, joiner of people, right? So in the cafeteria, I go sit with all my, classmates, and I'm eating American food for the very first time.
Wow.
And for the very first time, I drink cold milk. I've never had cold milk before. And I'm chugging it just like the rest of the kids. Come back to the classroom, and I proceed to vomit all over the desk.
No.
And I am mortified, Senator, and my mom is called. She has to come pick me up and take me home. And I am just, inconsolable. I'm crying and I'm telling my mom, I want to go back to India. I want to go back to grandma. By the end of the day, we hear a knock at the door. And when I open the door, it's one of my classmates. And in her hand is a stack of paintings that the kids had made for me, with smiley faces, sad tears coming down, and hearts. And, it was that moment. It was such an important lesson that I learned, because the public school teacher made the kids understand what it felt like to be in my shoes. She taught them empathy. And I think that's such a powerful quality to have as a leader. And I always look for that in any person that I meet, that sense of empathy for others.
Well, we're going to get to Wes on that, because he's like amazing on that. So I was going to ask whether in your childhood or throughout your education, did you experience discrimination? So that you experienced love and welcome and empathy. Did you have an experience that you want to share on the other side of that?
I grew up in the Midwest. While we lived in Poughkeepsie for a short period, most of my time was spent in the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri. And I have to say, I was probably one of, 10 kids in the entire class that was not, Caucasian, so a minority student there. And I'm talking all the classes, right?
Yes.
So definitely I stood out like a sore thumb, but I can't say that I was overtly discriminated against. Again, I felt like, especially in the school, the educators, my friends, they all made me feel like I was part of them.
That's amazing.
Yeah, even though I grew up in the Midwest.
Talk a little more before we move forward about learning English. What was that like? How big a challenge? How quickly did you take to it?
It was challenging. In fact, I say Sesame Street taught me English. My mom would
Nice.
make me watch that every single day. And at first, I'd be like, I don't know. I don't get this. But eventually I got it. I loved that. And I loved Zoom, but I didn't really like
The other Zoom, hold on. When we were
the other
younger,
Zoom.
the
Right.
other Zoom was a TV show, a kids' TV
That's
show. It's
right.
not this. Yes.
That's right. So it was a
Um,
struggle in the beginning, but I
yeah,
think kids are pretty resilient. I was pretty young, so I was able to grasp it quickly.
right. And your siblings and your folks must have helped with that process too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Senator, when I came, they were all strangers to me. My mom, my brother, my sister, my dad, the country. I was a stranger in a strange land, with strange people.
Amazing.
It was a pretty traumatic experience for me, I think, because I don't remember a single thing
Mm,
before I stepped off that plane
wow.
of
So
my
that
childhood.
that really speaks to your resilience and your focus on fitting in and learning and getting things done. It's amazing. So do you want to talk about your science and tech background before we head to Montgomery County?
Sure. Well, I am a civil engineer, and it was decided pretty early on in my life. When I was growing up, I thought, I'm going to be a journalist, and I'm going to marry Sean Cassidy. And my dad decided, oh, no, you're not. You're going to be an engineer. And I ended up marrying David Miller. So it was a pretty good deal. So
There you
my
go.
dad was an engineer. He was a mechanical engineer. And he would tell me all the time, girls can do anything boys can do. Don't you ever keep yourself out of that equation. Because you would often hear that it was mostly a male dominated field. And my dad was like, my daughter's going to be is as good as any one of those guys that are out there. He actually wanted me to be a computer science major. Way back then, he said,
Wow.
oh, Aruna, computers are going to be the future, and you should be, do it in computer science. And I thought I was so much smarter than my dad. I was like, that's okay, Dad. I'm going to pick civil engineering instead. But,
Wow.
it is what it is. But I'm grateful for my dad's guidance.
My dad made me take a semester of Fortran back when Fortran was the thing. My worst
Yes.
grade in my 4 years in college. It was, yeah, it didn't take. So you have three daughters. Are any of them in STEM fields?
Actually, my youngest is. She's a computer science major. Yep.
Nice, nice. That's great. So you came to Montgomery County and worked in transportation as a transportation engineer for 25 years, which is amazing. Why don't you talk about that job and the roles that you had and the impact that you had on Montgomery County transportation?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a great joy to work there. So many dedicated public servants. And I went from working on the sidewalks and bikeways program to being the planning manager, which basically is anytime there is large capital projects, you need to be able to do a report that justifies the need for it, what the costs are going to be, what the impacts are going to be, whether it's on the environment, human impact, natural resources, all of these. And so before you ultimately, or the elected officials ultimately give the funding for the project. Then I also worked in the Department of Permitting Services, and I saw how difficult it was for individuals, whether it was just an individual or business trying to come in and get licensing and trying to get through the permitting process. And we were doing the best we could at the time, but there's always room for improvement. And, that's something that if Wes and I are lucky enough to be elected as the next governor and lieutenant governor, we definitely want to focus on that and how to streamline our procurement process, our regulatory process, our permitting process, and
Yes.
make it easier for businesses and individuals.
So let's pivot to that. We're going to talk about the campaign and we're going to talk about Wes Moore, but let's stay with transportation for a bit, because you and Wes Moore just released a big, ambitious and specific transportation plan. So why don't you share some of the highlights for folks who haven't read it yet?
Yeah, so Senator, you know that Maryland has amazing economic, education, natural, cultural assets, but our transportation system needs to be better, be able to connect our citizens to jobs, to schools, to parks, to our community amenities. As a result, we've not lived up to our economic potential. And for most households, transportation is the second largest expenditure. So transportation is not only a means of mobility, but it's also an economic engine and a vehicle for lifting people out of poverty. So we have a big plan here, and we want to make sure that we build an efficient and equitable transportation system that unharnesses economic growth in our region, drives billions in new investments, and protects our environment and our neighbors, and connects people to their employers.
It's great. Why don't you give a couple of examples of some initiatives that you all are standing up for?
Sure. Well, we want to make sure that we improve mass transit, focus on the people who rely most on, their dependency on mass transit, expand things like mobility link, paratransit services for Marylanders with disabilities. There are a lot of our counties that already do this, but it would be great if we can have all 24 jurisdictions be able to apply this. One of the biggest barriers to employments that we've learned is transportation.
Yes.
And it is, right? Because a lot of times when individuals, let's say, have entry-level positions, well, many of those jobs require them to work during graveyard shifts and weekends, and public transit isn't always available during those times. So they can't even get to their public, first of all, they can't even get to their public transportation, area, and from there have that transportation.
Yes.
So, we have counties that have paratransit services, but they tend to be focused on seniors and disabled community, but we want to make sure this is available for every individual that is facing this barrier. So that's an area that we want to, improve upon. We want to make sure we establish bus lanes, expand improving commuter rail in the state, and develop true high-speed rail capacity.
So let's talk about a couple of specific things. The Purple Line was started and then it was stopped. Why don't you talk about the Purple Line in Montgomery and Prince George's County and the Red Line in Baltimore City?
Sure. Well, the red, okay, I can talk about the Purple Line. I think the Purple Line is terrific in the sense that, yes, it's public transit and something that we need to have, but unfortunately, I don't think it's been managed very well under the current administration with the P3 process. We've all read about it, on how much delays there is and how much additional funding that it's going to cost taxpayers. And that's a problem. Not only that, but we've got communities broken up with construction sites. Not only is it harming their public safety, but it's also harming the small businesses that are out there who are losing income as a result of these open construction sites.
Absolutely.
So, right. And I think once it's in, it'll be a great asset for the region. But right now, let's just say it's going through a lot of growing pains. I don't think the P3 contract was managed very well.
And to be clear, for someone who doesn't know what P3 means, it's a public-private partnership. So that's the lingo. The Red Line in Baltimore also was started and stopped. You all support that, correct? Anything else you want to add about that?
Absolutely. We absolutely believe that that's a project that must be there. It's unfortunate. And Senator, I think you and I were both in the Maryland General Assembly at the time when Governor Hogan decided he did not want to invest in the Red Line and essentially return $900 million back to the federal government. $900 million that the state of Maryland could have used. This could have been an economic engine for the Baltimore region, creating jobs, being able to connect people to jobs. I mean, there's so much potential there, and we picked it back. And that's unfortunate. And I think that is absolutely something that our administration, once we're in, if we are lucky enough to be there, that we will focus in on trying to retrieve that funding again and make sure it's up and running.
Yes. Let's talk for a moment about Metro, the WMATA, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. Anything you want to share about the Washington area metro system that's so fundamental to Montgomery and Prince George's counties?
Absolutely. Like you said, it's very essential to us to continue to invest in it with our neighbors in Virginia, DC, all three of us, to make sure that we continue to provide funding to make sure WMATA is successful. And I think, again, during the General Assembly, when I served with you, we were able to get funding that was going to be mandated every year. Before, it used to be every year it would come up. We would be struggling, to get the funding to make sure that WMATA got what it needed. So yes, it's very, very essential, and we're going to continue to support this effort.
Good, good. Pivoting before we leave transportation, Governor Hogan has been a big proponent pushing widening of the Beltway, widening of 270, and putting pricey tolls. Why don't you talk about the Moore-Miller plan for 270 and 495, the Beltway?
Sure. So as you know, that is a very controversial project, to say the least.
Yes.
So the first thing I will say, Senator Kagan, about the good side of having traffic. That means that we have jobs in our region. That means we have people here who want to move to Maryland. And that's the reason why we have a lot of congestion, right? We have jobs, we have people. But the drawback of that is we get traffic congestion.
Yes.
And I can tell you from being an individual that represented Up County residents and living in the Up County, I know the commuters, whether it's from Up County or even further north from Frederick and Washington County,
yes,
sit in gridlock. Okay, total gridlock coming down I-270.
Mm-hmm.
That is a problem. But however, I believe, and Wes and I believe that the way the project has been managed has not been managed in the best way possible. For example, again, it is a public-private partnership. And we just saw what happened with the Purple Line, what we're facing. And this is supposed to be even a bigger project than the Purple Line. And if the Purple Line is indicative of how the P3 is playing out, I don't think this P3 is playing out very well either.
So I'm going to be political for a second
Sure.
and make sure that viewers know that the decision about this, the pricey toll lanes and the plan to widen the Beltway, widen 270, is decided by the Board of Public Works. It's 3 votes, and former Treasurer Nancy Kopp voted no. The governor voted yes, and the swing vote was Comptroller Peter Franchot, and his yes vote was the one that has this project, this, I think, ill-considered and, a little bit thrown together plan moving forward. So that's disappointing. And I know that he is one of your opponents. So wanted to put that in there. Anything you want to add on that, or can we move on?
Well, I just wanted to say that Wes and I absolutely believe we need to make improvements along I-270, 495, but we don't think the current process and the P3 is the best way to do it. Good. We believe that we should try to do things within the footprint of the corridor, like having reversible lanes on I-270, improvements to other roadways within the vicinity, allowing buses on shoulders, incentivizing companies to allow their employees to work remotely. We've seen that it works in this past few years. So we should, encourage that, and increasing the frequency in MARC train.
Yes, yes, all of that. Aruna, we would be so lucky to have you as our lieutenant governor with all those years as a transportation engineer, as a civil engineer, and bringing that expertise. That's wonderful. So you decided to get into politics after all the years of being an engineer. What made you want to go into politics, and what made you a Democrat, or makes you a Democrat today?
Well, so I can tell you that was never in my horizon, Senator, to go into politics. Look, I am 100% nerd. I'm an engineer. They don't teach us how to be a politician when you're in engineering school whatsoever. Right? But here's how I got interested in being an engaged citizen. So growing up, my parents and I, we never talked about politics at the kitchen table. as immigrants, you're just trying to fit in, you're trying to stay under the radar, you're working hard. So you're really not being out there and being an active citizen. And so it wasn't until my adult life, and I became a citizen in the year 2000, if you can believe it, because my parents had never become citizen, and I just thought that was normal. And then, of course, I got married. I had 3 kids, and my husband's, is like, wait a minute, you should be a citizen here. It makes no sense. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I got to vote for the very first time in the presidential election with Al Gore and George W. Bush. I was so excited. I went into the polling booth and I remember crying because it was such a profound experience to be able to vote. And I thought, that's it. I did everything I needed to do to get my candidate elected. And of course, we know what happened.
Yeah.
And I walked, and after, thinking it over, I was like, wow, what if I had been more engaged? What if I had picked up the phone and called those 530 odd, voters in Florida? It could have made all the difference. And so I picked up the phone instead and called up the local Democratic Party. And I said, look, I want to help, but I don't know a thing about how you all do things. If you're willing to take somebody like me in, I'm happy to help. And they said, are you kidding? Absolutely.
That's fantastic. What a great story. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I became a precinct official, and then, got elected onto the Central Committee, and then an opening came up.
And then you ran for the House of Delegates. You became a wonderful legislator. Talk about, so you served 4 years on Appropriations, 4 years on Ways and Means Committee, 2 of the Money Committees. And why don't you talk about what you learned and the impact you think you made as a member of the House of Delegates?
It was so profound, Senator. In fact, I would say those 8 years were the most profound in my life, because what I learned is that policy making can create so much opportunity and liberty and freedom for our citizens, or it can shackle communities in oppression and fear and poverty. It's all policy, right? How we decide on, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. And through the process, I got to meet incredible colleagues such as yourself and the folks that I got to serve on the Ways and Means Committee, as well as the Appropriations Committee. And of course, I got to serve with our current speaker. She was actually my chair in Appropriations Committee on Capital Budget. And, I also got to work with Delegate Ann Kaiser. And so I had a lot of mentors there that guided me through the process, including Delegate Jocelyn Pena-Melnick. And I'm grateful.
Love her. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Incredible human being. I give her the soul. I learned so much from her. But, the folks I also learned a lot from were the citizens that contacted my office. That has been such a profound experience, to hear them, to meet them, to hear their trials and tribulations, stories that they shared with me, where we introduced legislation to address the grief that they were going through, because they had lost a member of their family for some reason that our loss could be strengthened to make it better, so other people lives wouldn't be lost.
Yes. So sticking with your time in the General Assembly in the House of Delegates for another couple of questions. Talk about, you were president of the Women Legislators Caucus. Tell me what that was like, because that's bipartisan. It's women elected in the House and the Senate from around the state. What was that like? And what did that teach you?
It was fantastic, but I know that, you have Democrats and you have the Republicans and women coming together. And I really enjoyed that experience because, again, you get to hear the different issues on both sides of the aisle. But the disappointing part of that was there was a lot of legislation that I know that the majority of the caucus wanted to support, but because we could not get support from our friends on the Republican side, a lot of legislation the caucus couldn't weigh in on, which is unfortunate, because there was so much legislation that talked about women's empowerment. But instead, we only weighed in on things where women were victims of crime or, something of that nature, which is important too. but we need to also make sure that we weigh in on bills that give women economic empowerment.
No question. Yeah, good for you. Before we pivot, so what are you proudest of? What bill did you pass? What accomplishment did you have from your 8 years that you'd like to share here?
I had a family that reached out to me, Senator, and we introduced a bill called Amber's Law. They had lost their daughter due to domestic violence. And this particular law would give victims of domestic violence to be able to request that their attacker has to wear a GPS tracking device. So essentially what that means is that this particular story, we named it after her. Her name was Amber Chanel. They lived in Prince George's County. She was dating a man, and the parents did everything they could to make sure that he wouldn't hurt their daughter. They changed the locks on their door. They sat vigilant outside their front lawn. The police station was only a couple of blocks away from their home. And still this individual broke into the basement window, slashed her throat, and killed her.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine the grief? They came to me with that horrific grief to my office. And they said, Delegate Miller, what can you do so this doesn't happen to any other person or any other family's child?
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. That's a terrible story.
It's a horrible story.
Yeah.
So I'm very proud of that bill.
Good for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So you decided to run for Congress. What made you decide? And you ended up raising an impressive amount of money and came in second in a very crowded field. Why don't you talk briefly about what it was like running for Congress and traveling all over the 6th district, which is far flung and very diverse?
I love the 6th district. Again, I say that the best part of campaigning, Senator, is the people you meet along the way. Once you meet them, once you hear their stories, their, like I said, their trials, their tribulations, and their hopes for Maryland, you're a different human being after that. You're no longer the same person when you started. So I absolutely loved every part of the campaign. Look, I would have liked to have had a different result, but it is what it is.
Right.
But I decided to run because, at the time we had Donald Trump, who was president, and it was just so hurtful to see the things that were happening, the things he was saying. And I felt like, my gosh, at the state level, we were doing so good. We had so many progressive policies, but I felt like at the federal level, everything was just falling through the cracks. And it was just like this hyper partisan atmosphere.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, I'd love to be able to add my voice and to really bring, substantive change there. And, that's why I decided to run. As you know, right now we have an all-male delegation.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
I don't really think that's a good thing when women represent 51% of our population. And I think we need to have representative democracy.
Right. I agree, but I don't think it's just picked by chromosomes and just by gender. I think we need quality and someone who shares our values too. So that's just my opinion. But you have served on the Maryland State Ethics Commission since 2019. Why don't you talk briefly about that, and then we'll shift to the campaign.
Sure. I had the honor of serving there. Speaker Bush at the time appointed me to the Ethics Commission, and I believe it was his last appointment. So I feel really deeply honored to be on the Ethics Commission, but I ended up having to resign because anytime you are going to be running for a partisan office, you can no longer serve on the commission.
Right.
But they do excellent work there. The staff is so dedicated, and so is the commission. Really stellar individuals that run the program there.
Yes. I wish Maryland didn't have a reputation of too many people sort of with ethical violations and questionable judgments on stuff, but let's move on. So tell me what it was like to get asked to run with Wes Moore, and what made you want to say yes?
Oh my gosh. So a funny story there. So I met Wes, my husband and I met him at the end of October. And needless to say, we walked away from our conversation with Wes and we were like, wow,
Yeah.
Wes Moore is going to be the next governor of Maryland. You know, it's just like this gut feeling I had. And same with my husband, who doesn't have gut feelings. He even says the same thing. And so we were so impressed. I mean, first of all, he's got a stellar resume,
Yes.
a deeply compelling life story, a great vision for Maryland. And when I met him, one of the things I liked most about him is that he had this sense of empathy
Yeah.
for others. And as I said, I believe that's such an important quality for a leader. And it's shown, you know, just like so much when I met him that day.
Yeah.
So then, you know, as the situation goes, I'm sure Wes was considering other individuals as well. And then I believe it was Thanksgiving weekend. And I get a call from the campaign manager and he says, hey, Wes would like to do a Zoom call with you. Would that be okay if we recorded it? And I'm like, what? Why do you want to record it? Is this going to be an interview? Is there going to be other people there? Please let me know ahead of time.
Right.
And he's like, no. You know, this is just for, you know, this is what we do.
Right.
So I'm a little suspicious. And I'm like, wow. You know, is he gonna like, you know, let me down and tell me that he decided that he doesn't want me to be his running mate? He's going to record that.
Oh, that would be mean. That would be terrible.
Right? That's what I was thinking. And so all night I couldn't sleep. I'm like, oh my God, he's going to tell me that I'm not it. That's okay.
Right.
It doesn't matter because I'm still going to support him because I think he's going to be a fabulous, you know, candidate.
Yes.
And then it turned out that he actually asked the question.
Right.
And then I forget that it's being recorded, Senator. And so I have this very real goofy response to it.
Not goofy. It was authentic. It was so beautiful. I loved that video.
Oh, thank you. My kids tease me about it all the time. They're like, Mom, you're turning into a meme. What was that reaction you had? They're like, it's like the Bachelor show. What should have reached out and gave you a rose through the window or something?
That's so cute. No, but it's life-changing. I mean, that Zoom was huge. And what an honor for both of you. So very exciting. So if you had to describe, you've talked about empathy. If you had to describe Wes Moore for someone who doesn't know anything about him in 3 words, 3 adjectives, and you've already said empathy. So give me 3 new ones. What would you say?
He's positive, always positive, optimistic, right? Very inclusive, and he's a great listener.
Amen. Totally. Those are good choices. Yeah. So how is the campaign going so far?
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, we are thrilled to get the support that we've gotten. And Senator, thank you for your endorsement. You were one of the earliest individuals that endorsed our campaign. We are so grateful for that.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so we have, of course, also most recently received Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsterbrook.
Huge.
Right? Huge.
Yeah.
We've also received endorsement from County Executive Anne Arundel, Stuart Pittman.
Yep.
And a former governor, Paris Glendenning. Yep. And the list goes on and on. Yeah. And I believe we have like the most endorsements from elected officials in the state so far.
Great.
And, you know, that says a lot because these are individuals who are in public office and still believe that Wes, who's a first-time candidate, is going to be the best governor moving forward. So that says a whole lot about our campaign. So we're deeply grateful for that. And as far as fundraising, when the numbers came out, I believe we were the #1 fundraisers.
$4.8 million. That was so impressive. Congratulations to you both.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have a lot of momentum behind them. We have like over 5,000 volunteers who have signed up and they're doing texting and they're doing canvassing and they're putting up lawn signs. I mean, it's everywhere. So
except it's not momentum, it's momentum. Isn't that what they call it? Yes, love that. And to be clear, the excitement isn't just about Wes, it's about Wes and Aruna. It really is. It's what you bring to the ticket. And it's so exciting, Aruna. It was such a great pick. So what is your favorite aspect of the campaign and what's your least favorite? so far?
My favorite aspect, of course, is always hanging out with Wes Moore, right? I mean, he just exudes this positive energy. He could tell you the worst news in the world, and you walk away like you just won the lottery.
True.
I'm not. I mean, he's done that to me before. It's like, hey, Aruna, I can't make it to this, event, but you're gonna crush it. You're gonna do a great job. And I'm like, wow, yeah, I'm going to. And then I walk away. I'm like, did he just say he wasn't coming to the event?
Perfect.
I would say the hardest part of the campaign is doing these Zoom meetings, Senator. It is so hard because when you're in a room and you can do meet and greet and you can shake hands, look people in the eye, talk to them, listen to them rather than talking at them. That's what happens in Zoom. You're just talking at them. You never have that dialogue.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the worst part about it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Talk about the impact of the primary date from June to July and how you think that's going to work for you, for the ticket, and for the party.
Sure. I think most of us are kind of disappointed that it got moved because that just means it's 3 more weeks that you got to make sure that you got enough funding there to be able to do all the things you need to do.
Right.
But it's a decision that's been made. And if nothing else, when you're running a campaign, you need to be nimble. You need to be ready to do whatever the changing environment is. And this is one of them. And I think we are more than prepared for the extra 3 weeks.
Perfect. Before we go to the Fast Five, do two things for me, if you would. Talk about what you would like. What's your niche going to be as lieutenant governor? Do you have a role that Marylanders should expect you to be, playing?
Sure, that's a great question. So the Constitution really does not define what the role of a lieutenant governor is, unless there's an absence when the governor isn't there. But I can tell you, Wes and I have talked about this extensively, and we are definitely going to define what that role of the lieutenant governor is. It hasn't been done before, but we're going to do it. But I can tell you my 3 niches that I would be interested in is transportation, of course, given my background.
Yes.
I'm also very much interested in mental health services.
Nice.
I think, I've had family members who have suffered from mental health issues, as well as you've seen a whole nation fall apart during COVID. And this is so critical, I think. And we've had friends who, people have taken their lives. And it's just so tragic to hear that. And we need to talk about it. We need to, bring sunlight to it. We cannot be, continue to sweep it under the rug and that it's going to disappear. No, we need to be out there talking about it and coming up with policies that's going to be able to meet the needs of those suffering from this.
Yes.
And then, of course, domestic violence is also very important to me, just by the story I shared earlier.
Yes.
I want to make sure survivors of domestic violence, whether it's women, men, or children, have the resources they need to be able to be empowered.
Fantastic. Those are great. Those are great. Well, former delegate Aruna Miller, we're gonna hang. I can't even speak. I'm so excited that you're here. I've got my Fast Five questions, brief questions, brief answers to let folks get to know a few more things about you. So question number 1, did you pick up a new hobby during COVID? And what was it?
Yeah, I did. I certainly did. Turns out I'm a fabulous cook.
Look at you. Anything in particular that's an expertise, a specialty of yours?
So what happened during COVID is my 3 adult daughters and one of them who's married husband were all living with us for 1 year, because many of they were all New Yorkers. And so they came and lived under one roof. And my mom lives with us as well. Yes. So given the fact—
fabulous mom, you're fabulous mom, we got to say, yes.
And so I took it upon myself to make meals for the whole family because we didn't have the luxury of going to restaurants because of COVID. Yes. And so my greatest friend was YouTube. My gosh, everything I've ever wanted to learn and cook right there on YouTube. And Senator Kagan, I got to tell you, I make some fabulous bagels.
All right. Wow. From scratch.
Yep.
That's amazing. All right. Question 2. What sort of music do you like listening to? And do you have one favorite song that's kind of your anthem that lifts you up and inspires you?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a classic rock person, right? I love the Beatles, Pink Floyd, I like Bob Dylan, but I would say probably my one song, and I even have it as a ringtone, and it's a song by a band named Badfinger,
Uh-huh.
and it's called Baby Blue.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is, my kids would tease me about it every time the phone rang. That would be my ringtone, and they teased me about it all the time until Breaking Bad. Did you ever see that show?
Yeah, a couple times.
I've never seen it, but
Okay.
apparently that's a popular show. But that was their season finale song that they ended with.
Wow, look at you. All right.
But then
That's
all of a
awesome.
sudden, my kids thought I was cool.
That's
That
fantastic.
teased me.
Fantastic. So we are about to celebrate Maryland Day, and you have been traveling all over the state. So question 3, share a gem, someplace you've discovered in the state of Maryland that you hadn't been to before.
Great question. So I would say Easton, Maryland.
I knew you were going to say Easton. Yes, Talbot
It
County.
is beautiful.
It
Oh
is
my
beautiful.
gosh, I'd never been there before. And the warm reception we got was even more incredible as to
Yes.
why I love it. It was just it's like this sleepy little town.
But it's
And
not, but it's charming, and it's got craft stores and yummy restaurants. And yeah, I just was talking to a friend who said that there are more Miller signs everywhere in Easton. So there's a lot of love for you in Easton. So that's fantastic that it's reciprocated.
oh yeah.
Question 4, if you could live anywhere outside of Maryland, anywhere in the world for a year, where would you choose?
Hawaii.
Nice. Okay. And the last question, the one that I ask everyone, is former delegate, Lieutenant Governor, hopefully our next Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is something, a skill or a talent that you have that most folks can't do?
Okay, it's not a skill or a talent, but Senator, I've been known that when I pull into a parking lot, the best space always opens up for me.
Dang.
My husband loves to take me to Costco. Have you been there in that parking lot?
Yes,
It
it's
is like a
terrible.
war zone, okay?
Yes.
Everybody's fending for themselves. He loves to take me because once
Wow.
I'm in the car, the closest spot to the door opens up magically. That's
That's
my
that's a pretty good superpower, actually. That's helpful. That's funny.
yeah. That's what I have. That's my lottery in life.
Well, I think you've got
Parking
tons
spots.
more than that, but that's pretty funny. Before we wrap up, Delegate Miller, why don't you briefly just give a pitch, because you are raising money. So why don't you give the website? You can accept money even while the legislature is in session. Not every candidate can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Senator. So please go on to wesmore.com and you can learn about the issues that we are fighting for. You can learn more about Wes and I. And of course, please sign up to volunteer, and we'd love to have you make a small contribution as well.
Or a large contribution, large or small, whichever is
large or small, absolutely. But more importantly, we humbly ask those that are listening for your vote.
Fantastic. Well, Aruna Miller, you are a wonderful running mate, a phenomenal leader with great experience and an unconventional background that I think is going to be a real benefit for the residents of Maryland as when you become Lieutenant Governor next January. So wishing you all the best. I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. Thank you so much thank you so much for your time and for the chance to kibitz with you today.
Thank you very much, Senator.
See you soon.
See you.